G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Caitlin. I'm an American romance writer living in beautiful Sydney, Australia, and after a very long journey, I'm happy to announce that I finally have my Australian permanent residency. This was a long journey, a long time coming, so I'm going to break down what exactly is permanent residency, what it grants me, what I still don't have permission to do yet, what happens with citizenship, and what happens with my American citizenship now that I have permanent residency in Australia. So my cat has decided to also join us for this video, so if you want to stay tuned, grab a Bicky, grab a cuppa, and let's get right into this video. So if you're fairly new to this channel, let me give you a little bit of background. My name is Caitlin. I am an American. I fell in love with an Australian when I was here on holiday in 2019, and we started a relationship very shortly after that. We knew we were going to get married. It didn't take us long to decide that I would move to Australia rather than him move to the States. And we looked into the visa process. It is a very long, tedious process, and all this happened right at the start of 2020 pre-COVID. So given the fact that borders had completely shut down, I was not able to get into Australia because my husband had recently been in an accident and was getting medical treatment here. He wasn't able to leave Australia. There were a lot of reasons why for 2 years we were long distance, and all of it came down to the government wouldn't let me in and he wasn't able to leave because he needed medical care. So those were a very long, draining 2 years, but as of December 2021, I moved to Australia, and Australia is now my home. Obviously, you need a visa to enter Australia, and we knew that I was going to be moving over long term, so we looked at long-term visa solutions, not just a working holiday visa or a ESTA visa that Americans are eligible for to move over here. So we looked at the partner visa options. Because of COVID and us not being able to spend nearly as much time physically together as we wanted, we decided to go for the 300 prospective marriage visa. We knew we wanted to get married. We knew going into that it would put a time limit on when we could get married. But ultimately we knew that's what the end goal, the end game was anyway, so we were fine with having a sort of government implemented deadline as to when we could get married once the visa was approved. So we started getting paperwork together and documents together, and that took a little while given COVID, the fact that there were offices that were shut down. We needed to get copies of paperwork done. We needed to get paperwork that was verified by a notary in the States and a JP here in Australia. So there was a little bit of delay in getting all the paperwork together. Plus, like I said, my husband was going through a lot of treatment and whatnot. He literally broken both hands and basically didn't have use of his arms for a little while. So it took a little while for us to get the paperwork together. We submitted that visa on the 31st of August 2020, which is when I started this whole visa journey. When we applied for the visa in August of 2020, it was 2020. The rules were up in the air. Things were constantly changing with COVID. Things weren't consistent for a little while. They actually stopped processing that particular visa because once it's approved, you have to be able to enter the country because you then have to get married within 9 months. They extended it out to 12 months for COVID. I don't know if it's still extended 12 months or if it's gone back to 9. But it took almost a year for that visa to get granted. That was approved on the 5th of August, 2021, and that was when I was able to get a travel exemption to come over because they had finally relaxed the rules around that visa as well. So it was a very mentally, emotionally, and draining process, given the fact that we couldn't be together, COVID was happening, flights were limited to like 25 people on a flight, and seats were going for like $25,000. It was an absolutely wild, crazy time that we met and started going through this visa process. So it was probably a little bit longer than it would be standard for a lot of other couples, but I was able to get a flight for December 2024, moved my cats over, quit my job in the States, shipped everything over to Australia, and moved over here as of the 6th of December 2021. So from then we had 12 months to pick a date, get married. We got married the 1st of October 2022, and from there we then lodged the next stage of the visa in November of 2022, which was the 820 subclass partner visa. So that's the temporary partner visa. And these visas are a little bit odd because you're kind of applying for 2 visas at once, but also technically not. If you meet certain eligibility criteria, and let's face it, if your case officer had a decent cup of coffee that morning, they could approve both visas at the same time, so you would get the temporary and then the permanent visa granted at the same time. Even though we were eligible for it, I guess my case officer had had a bad morning and only granted the temporary visa as of March 2024. So because we had lodged the 820 visa application on November of 2022, you have to wait 2 full years from the date you apply in order to then lodge the 801 permanent visa. So I had to wait until the middle of November 2024 to apply for my permanent residency. Even though I had approved temporary residency, I've had work rights since I moved over here. I was then eligible for Medicare once I applied for the 820 visa. So we waited a few months from the middle of November 2024 until the date I got my approval on my permanent residency, the 25th of June 2025. So if I've already been able to work, I've already had Medicare, what does it really matter whether I have permanent residency or not? Well, the Australian laws state that in order to apply for Australian citizenship, there are 2 criteria you have to meet. 1, you have to be living in Australia for a minimum of 4 years. And 2, for at least one of those years, you have to be a permanent resident. Well, I've already lived in Australia for over 3 years on a temporary visa, so we were just waiting for that permanent residency to be approved, because once I've lived in Australia for 1 year, at that point I will be able to apply for citizenship. Australia is a country that does allow dual citizenship, so does the US currently. So I will be able to be a dual citizen once all that paperwork goes through in the future. As for benefits, there's nothing immediate. I think it allows me to have certain Centrelink benefits like job seeker. There are certain Centrelink benefits that are only eligible for permanent residents and citizens that temporary residents don't get. There are also certain loans that are eligible for permanent residents and aren't eligible for temporary residents. I looked into getting a little bit of dental work and stuff like that done in any sort of dental payment plan. You either had to be a permanent resident or a citizen. I think if I wanted to go back to school, things like HECS, you either have to be a permanent resident or citizen. And when it comes to buying a house, if you're a temporary resident, there's an additional 7% stamp duty, basically another tax that you then have to pay. So imagine if you're buying $1 million house and you have to pay another 7% stamp duty. So it's nice to know that when we go to buy a house, we will not have that hanging over our heads anymore. So there are some actual benefits to it. One common question that people ask me all the time is what's the difference between that and getting citizenship? Citizenship is basically you get full status. There are some jobs that would make me eligible for once I get citizenship. If I decide to go work in the public service, the APS, I'd then be eligible, but you have to be a citizen. You can't be a permanent resident. For voting, you have to be a citizen. You can't be a permanent resident. Is it going to change my day-to-day living when I go from permanent resident to citizen? Ultimately, no, but there are still benefits to being a citizen over being a permanent resident. And given the fact that I come from a country that accepts dual citizenship, I see no drawbacks in having citizenship in both countries. It'll allow me to go freely back and forth. I'll have full working rights in both countries. I'll have some benefits in both countries. I do plan on applying for citizenship when I am eligible, which will probably be the end of June 2026. Given the fact that we are going to the States for a little while, I have to look into whether or not you're actually in Australia for a full year as a permanent resident, or if it's just that your residence is in Australia for that full year, because we'll be away for probably close to a month, and that might delay me being able to apply by about a month. But then it is another very, very long wait, and more paperwork, and more costs, and more fees. If you guys like, I can do a full video breakdown about what it actually costs for me to become an Australian permanent resident. It's a lot. I've done a previous video, but it's not full up to date. There are more costs, surprise costs that were added on top of that. So if you guys would be interested in that video, let me know in the comments down below. I'd be happy to put something like that together for you guys so you can see just how expensive it is to get to Australia. Because people seem to be under this misconception that you only pay a couple grand and it's very simple. It is actually very long, very tedious, very difficult. And there are multiple pathways, but the partner visa pathway is probably the most heavily scrutinized. It's also the most expensive partner visa in the world and takes the longest to actually get. So yeah, not an easy process by any means. So that's it, you guys. I am a permanent resident of Australia. This is my first video that I'm making for this channel as a permanent resident. So let me know what you guys think. If you guys have any questions, let me know down below. If you guys like this video, please hit the like and subscribe button down below. That actually really does help this channel because it supports the video. It boosts it out to other people who might be interested and does help grow this channel. So thank you all so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.